Welcome to my spoiler-free review of the 1989 Sega Genesis game Golden Axe 1. The game is rated E for everyone, I believe. So will this video be. And I really love this game. So I am going to try not to restate too much. So first off, the whole thing with arcade games, the various sort of basic qualities of arcade and arcade style games, arcade likes, I already covered in my video on Space Harrier 2, so I'm going to try not to repeat what I said. I just repeated myself. Yeah, so if you don't already feel like you have a firm enough grasp on such, I recommend that video, or the first chunk of it. You should be able to tell when I move into specifics that do not apply to this one. And let's get the video recommendation done as well, so I do not forget. So if you haven't already watched the excellent, as usual for him, Jake Geller video, fairly recent, more games that save the best for last, I absolutely recommend it. The rare case where one of my video recommendations actually has anything to do with the actual subject of my video. And yeah, I want to specify a couple of things up front. I pretty much only played as Gilius Thunderhead in this, so, you know, the things I say about the gameplay are going to be primarily about him. I guess I'll just very briefly note, I tested the other two, basically, it's one of those, it's a side-scrolling fighter, and basically, yeah, not fighting tournament, but beat 'em up. I think side-scrolling beat 'em up is the term, terminology. And the basically the three have different ranges, attack, damage, and their magic also does different amounts of damage. And I read somewhere that Gilius was the best sort of, he's right there in the middle. He's not really powerful but slow, or vice versa. And I think that pretty much covers, I guess I'll just very briefly note, I have not played the other Golden Axe games yet. I think I have at least one more. And this review will be based on the emulated version I played this on PC. The emulated version that, back when you could still buy it, I'm hoping with these videos to manifest that they bring this back. But yeah, the Sega Genesis slash Overdrive, I think it was called. You know what? I'm gonna have to look up. I'm gonna just real quick see if I can even find. Here we go. Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Classics is what the collection is called. So basically, it is a very straightforward story. There's the land is under attack, and you and maybe a co-op buddy will go and fight. And co-op does sound fun. I very rarely play co-op these days, but if I understand correctly, you know what, it's just in case. I'm gonna just leave it, but since I haven't tried it, but it does sound like it might be fun. Right, I barely played the dual mode. That's dual with an E. And not dual with an A, like a dual shock. And basically, yeah, you fight your way through increasingly difficult enemies. I played very little of it. I didn't think it was particularly engaging compared to the story mode. Also, if you choose, I forget what it's called, maybe just called practice mode or easy mode or something like that, that means that you don't get to play the entire game. And I didn't realize this the hard way. I thought that might be the case, so I looked it up, and sure enough, because I am never making that mistake again after the first time I played Hercules, the licensed Disney animated game. That was so annoying. I don't know why they didn't just put in, just when you choose that in the menu, why not just pop up with, hey, that's not the full game though. You're not gonna let you play the entire game if you choose this method. Are you absolutely sure? This is purely to like learn the mechanics and that sort of thing, which like isn't that what the tutorial is for? Okay. Anyway, as I play more of these, I am getting the sense that a bunch of them do have very similar sort of core, so I don't think I'm going to spend forever on, like, basically, yeah, you are moving, you're moving, this, it's like a side view. You can move up, down, left, right, and diagonally. You have a basic attack, which can stun lock enemies, but they can also stun lock you, and they frequently outnumber you. If you move towards an enemy and attack, you may be able to perform a grab, or is it called a hold? I forget. It's been too long since I played more fighting games. And you may be able to throw the enemy. You also have a jump and jump attack, and so do at least some of your enemies. A bunch of this is making sure that you're exactly on the same plane, not of existence, as the enemies, because if you're just slightly off and you swing your weapon, and then they move, they spend it doesn't take a huge amount of time for you to, for the animation to complete, but I think it might be less than a second, but that might be just enough time for them to move to the same plane and then start attacking you. And, I mentioned in my Space Harrier True video, some of these games you kind of, a bunch of these arcade likes and arcades, you have to just get used to, okay, this is how the game plays. There will be times where your enemy will just spend a while just, like, they'll be trying to surround you, which is not good for you. It is for them. And, you have to, yeah, they'll be getting close to being on the same plane, but not quite, while waiting for the other one or more other enemies of yours to get into position so they can surround you, And this is a crucial element to master, that's the word, because if you do not, there are enemies who simply outrank you. No, I mean, sorry, out of media experience, I'm sorry, I appreciate a Jewish comedian mocking the Nazis absolutely ruthlessly. I am considering doing a video on that and other Mel Brooks movies. Anyway, they outrange you, and that's just how it is. You are never going to be able to attack quite as far with your regular weapon. However, there are dragons. There be dragons in this game, and they tend to start with someone else on them. But one hit from your weapon to the person on there, and that dragon no longer has a rider. And you may have to be really fast, because once again, they might surround you. But if you can jump onto that dragon, yeah, it's now obeying your commands. And, right, I just realized that I forgot to mention, you can also do this sort of run, and the run can launch into a sort of flying attack. It leaves you very exposed, so just keep that in mind. But run is also something you want to master, because there are times where enemies are just so aggressive that you'll have to run, But yeah, the dragon can do that as well. At least a run. I'm not. I forget if I might have actually forgotten to test if they can do a run attack as well. But they have, attacks that are quite useful. One of them, it's a tail swipe, and I'm not entirely sure if. Certainly, I realize a bunch of the time it will. I'm not certain if it's universal, but at least a bunch of the time, maybe maybe you need to move in a specific way, but it will actually swap which side it is attacking, which obviously makes you trying to stun lock the same enemy tougher, but is also useful if they are trying to surround you. So, you know, the other dragons have fire breath. One of them, it sort of attacks the ground right in front of you, and the other shoots an actual fireball. I was not able to get control of that last one, let's say very much in this, but it was really really cool. And yeah, of course, to be, I don't know, maybe I didn't make this clear yet. The enemies on, if an enemy is on a dragon and they can jump, the first enemy can jump back on the dragon. Other enemies can jump onto the dragon if you don't do so, and you will also be knocked off by one hit. But they will also use these attacks against you. And I thought they did a fantastic job. There was a part very early on where I was like, there are a lot of dragons here. But then after a while, they really started to slow down. And by the end of the game, I do feel like there is a very solid, what's the word? Like, the amount of dragons in the game is appropriate for the length, because it's not so much that all you're ever doing, because like where's that would also just get old, as cool as it is. Like some of the funnest stuff of this game is you getting to ride a dragon, but like they made the effort to also make it so that you can fight without a dragon, but yeah. And also there's not so few that by the end of it I felt like, oh well, that wasn't, there wasn't enough of that, because if you add something that fun, you gotta let us actually use it some, but and yeah, after a while I was like, I'm not sure there's gonna be more dragons. So it is this sort of like, once you reach a certain point there may not be more dragons, or at least not very many, and that kind of tells you, oh, you know, we are approaching the conclusion, not necessarily like immediately get there, but, and I thought that was a very clever way to, yeah. I I guess that pretty much covers that. So it can end up feeling grindy. The version I played, the emulated, has save states with, I guess, technically a total of 5 slots, as well as rewind. Also fast forward if you get really bored during cutscenes, but that's, they're not super long. But it's there if you want it. And basically, the, yeah, with that, you don't necessarily have to play this, all the way through unless you feel like it. But it is not just like sleepwalking through. There are still a bunch of places where, yeah. And if you do want to have the original experience of just having to play as long as you can and then, memorizing and again and again and again, it's there. You're never forced to use rewind or save states at all. There is a non-zero number of boss fights where they do that thing that I have to say I am not the biggest fan of, where it's very difficult to tell if you're close to defeating the boss. And I appreciate that that is a tool in their toolkit, because it means that you need that much more sort of determination and patience. personally, you know, and to be clear, I'm not saying that as someone who like only plays recent games. Like, listen, I think, is it about every 2 weeks or so I do one of these emulator games. I love these, you know, and most of the ones I do videos on are not ones that I played when I was younger. You know, so it's not about that. I'm just saying comparatively, I prefer the ones where, you know, as you do more damage, they maybe start blinking, maybe the blinking intensifies, maybe they start to change color. And there's at least one boss here that does not happen for, and I found that to be a little annoying. But at the same time, you know, yeah, when I got all the way through this game, you know, near the end, I was thinking, you know what, maybe I'm just going to pause and make a save state and try again tomorrow. And then I actually managed to complete it, you know, so I appreciate there's some fun there, you know, like this was back when part of video gaming was the sense of relief of completion. You know, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, you know, complex story or deeply emotionally. It's just like, I got there, you know, and just, yeah. Now, I feel like yeah, so the controls are very nice and easy to learn. You know, one button for magic, and that's just, you know, you press the button, the magic does its thing. There's one button for all attacks, regardless of anything else, and one button that does nothing but jump. And yeah, you almost immediately get a hang of it, especially if you've played even one game somewhat similar to this. And I wanted to note about, yeah, I really haven't talked about magic. So basically, it attacks at least some of the enemies on screen. You have to collect these little jars. Let's go with that. These containers in order to be able to do magic, and the level of magic will be determined by how many of them you have. And every so often you will deal with so the end credits refer to them as thieves, green and blue thieves, and basically they will try to steal it from you, and they have this run pattern where, you know, every so often they'll stop, but they won't stand in the place they stopped for long enough for you to move there. So you basically have to know where they're going to stop, stand close enough, and then attack them. And I appreciate that, you know, sometimes you'll be using one of the dragons, the fire breath, and that was apparently deemed such a satisfying part of it that this is actually the part, you know, one of the games in the intro sequence, which is like maybe a minute long, for the collection, not for this game. That would defeat the purpose. But yeah, there's like, I counted them, I think is it 8 maybe total? And yes, Sonic is one of them. Goes without saying, I think, but just to confirm. But yeah, you know, and yeah, it's specifically, like, it shows it twice. One of them is, and I think both clips were of Gillian, actually. But yeah, one of them was of you just using the axe, and one of them was you on a dragon using the fire breath against one of the thieves. And as soon as you attack a thief, whatever he stole, some of them steal health. Yeah, whatever they stole will go flying back out of them, and then you have to go pick it up. And I think that does pretty much cover the so the yeah, I that's another thing. The magic, see, the thing is, you may want to use it in a level before you end the level, because you might be able to get more for the next level anyway, and that doesn't mean you have 2 magic attacks for the next level. You're still only going to have the one, you know, until you get more of these containers, which you know, is not necessarily going to happen in every level. And as such, you may want to wait until you're late in the level, and maybe, you know, on repeat plays, you want to remember which level has the little thieves, because at least some of the time, if you attack the thief before he steals from you, you will be able to get new magic or health. from him, and that's genuinely very cool because like there were times where I ended a level and I didn't know those were the last ones, and now I'm dealing with thieves, so I might as well use the magic. So that's one way that they reward the memorization. One area where I am seeing that some of these struggle a little. This was also an issue in the, I would say, 1989 arcade Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. Enemy design variety. Basically, they don't do themselves any favors by putting them right there on the end credits, because that really reminded me of just how many there are. There's not that huge a number of different designs. What they do is reskin. So there's maybe half a dozen different skins for the same basic visual design, and yes, they attack in slightly different ways. They're at the end they're graded from attack and movement, which is how and that's the thing. You are recognizing them by their appearance and part of the skin, and then you're like, okay, this one attacks like this. But it wouldn't have been terrible if there had been a tiny bit more. But I also appreciate technical limitations of the time and such. It's something you maybe notice, especially because there are games out there that get way more, yeah, they're also just a little bit like kind of just basic fantasy creature stuff. And I mean, I'm sorry, but I played Final Fight. If you're not, it's difficult to top that one as far as enemy designs go. I appreciate that, but it was genuinely so cool playing my way through that and just see like, what are they going to throw at me next? I did a video on it, so you can just watch that one instead of me reiterating. And it is, of course, also, whether that's a good or a bad thing, the following is a neutral statement. It is a game where once you basically have the gist of it, it is kind of just playing on. It's not necessarily going to evolve tremendously. You are trying to get into a position where you can attack an enemy without being surrounded and not letting them attack first, and rinse and repeat, which is also why I found the story mode more engaging than duel, because in the story mode, as you play through it, sometimes you're fighting, I don't know if I want to give the exact number, but more enemies. So on occasion it's maybe just one. Sometimes it's two, sometimes it's more. And I will say I wasn't entirely sure if it was a glitch. Most of the time, the AI is flawless. There was at least one time where a very powerful enemy seemed to kind of, I don't know if get stuck is the right term. They stood in one particular part of the level close to me and just walked a little bit to one side, walked a little bit back to the other side. They didn't really attack, and they didn't approach me, and I wasn't sure if that was me finding an exploit, because it was a very challenging enemy, so maybe that was what you were supposed to do to get a little bit of breathing room to fight off others in that level. One thing I definitely want to make sure to say about enemies, one of them is a skeleton. And apparently that was also such a big thing that was, because that's the other enemy that you fight. That's the one you fight with the axe in the, or the Gillian does, whatever, Gil does in the intro video to the collection. But I did notice that if you, because there are times where there are steep drops, which you want to be careful of, because you can get knocked back into one, but you can also knock enemies into. And I realized that if you do that with a skeleton, he just hops right back in. Because like, it's a skeleton. What is he, what did you think that was going to kill him? That's not a thing. I mean, you can kill them, but not like that. And yeah, I guess it goes without saying, it is of course entirely linear. Yeah, I mean, it of course doesn't have as much it can use to accomplish it with as more recent games, but the atmosphere is nicely done. I did genuinely feel like I am a hero of the land. I am defending, all these monsters. There's a bit where you go into like a village and there's like fires and you see some villagers run past you screaming for help. Like, yeah, that works. That genuinely if you're trying to play a video game where you're playing as the good guy and trying to stop the evil, it's very black and white in its morality. Yeah, this will scratch that itch. And it also does not get excessive with cutscenes, which, I mean, that is fairly typical. I don't know that I can think of a game from around this time that I've seen that did just spend forever on any one cutscene. And they tend to be very to the point. It is just saying, oh, there is still, your enemy is in another castle, or, oh, you did it, now you can move on to the next stage, that sort of thing. And yeah, the graphics, there's just enough creativity in designs, not just for enemies and your character. And I appreciated that the three, well, let's see, so Gil has an axe. Right now I forget. Right, to be clear, I mean no disrespect. I don't remember the full name. I remember those first three letters right now, and my wrist is too sore to look it up. Anyway, the at least one of the others has like a sword, maybe. Right now I forget if it's both of the others or is it a dagger, but something is yeah. And yeah, the sound design is really, really solid. Like everything sounds like, okay, that hurt, that injured that other one or you yourself. At least one enemy can also use magic, so just be aware of that. The music gets you into it and keeps your adrenaline high throughout. And the game finds a good balance of being challenging and fun, once again, for arcade-like. And the collection has, like, I think 2 in-game achievements for this. And I think that is about... So yeah, the replayability, if you choose not to use rewinds and or save states, you will have to play this a bunch of times because there's basically no way that the very first time you sit down with it, you'll be able to play all the way through it, no matter how many other games you've played, because you do have to memorize enemy attack patterns and the amount of them there are and where and such. Right. If you just launch directly into playing this and you find that it's a little bit too difficult, go back to the menu. There is a function for, I think it's how much health you have max, and that can really make a difference. I think you maybe end on like 5 or something, that's the max, and I think the minimum might be like 3 or something, and that, yeah, that really makes a difference. You start with like 3 lives, or is that just on that specific difficulty? I don't remember. I believe I had 3 extra lives, or lives total. I forget. And there is a continue function as well. Now I think the yeah, the setting is well achieved. Like it genuinely does feel like you're moving through this like sort of medieval-ish fantasy setting, and there's just enough variety. There's these cliffs, which is where the steep drop is. There's the village I already mentioned. There is at least one more. Yeah, I don't want to give it away exactly, but there's an area where when you reach it, you're like, I am close to the end because this must be where the main villain is. And let's see, yeah, the level design, it's one of those cases where they're obviously somewhat limited because you are always moving from left to right, but they do a good job of making them distinct. That's the I wish that the enemies were as distinctly different from each other as the levels manage to be. But once again, it's not really a problem. It's just something you notice, especially considering some of its competition, you know, beat it up in that regard. Yeah, I rate this 8. Good warriors fighting their way through evil to make the world a safer place. So basically what the Trump regime is claiming to be doing in Iran. Oh wait, I'm sorry, is the war over? Oh wait, no, the war started back up again, or... Yeah, if Trump could ever make up his mind about anything, well, I guess he might be even more harmful then, but I don't know. I guess I just think that, obviously, war should be the last resort. You should almost never actually engage in it. But if you're gonna, maybe make a plan. Like, actually think before you act. I know, that's complete anathema to the entire Trump cabinet. And maybe stick to it instead of just waffling so much and just making the world a worse, less safe place. But yeah, I mean, that is kind of a unsurprising result here. And I'm not advocating for violence against him or anyone in his administration or in MAGA. It's getting so tiring how much we on the far left have been demanded to declare that ever since Charlie Kirk got shot. I'm not saying that absolutely no one on my side was outright celebrating, not myself, but a bunch of the people who were accused of doing so were literally just quoting him to, like, underline, hey, he wasn't, this, like, perfect angel. Like, if you want to celebrate someone who's innocent, there's quite a lot of minorities who were murdered by American police who do fit that, but somehow that doesn't seem to matter as much to conservatives. And let's also just please not pretend like conservatives with prominent platforms, like, I refuse to use the term journalist, media personalities and politicians, they will very openly, very publicly celebrate the death of minorities and pretend like, oh, they deserved it. I'm advocating for legally, through the system, having Trump removed from office because he is simply not capable anymore. He was never qualified, but now he seems so disinterested. Like, people will ask him about something really important that is literally his job, the one he fought hard for 3 times and got twice, though he is probably never going to stop it. I wonder, do you think he's literally ever going to stop saying that he won in 2020, as if it doesn't, as if it has any bearing on today whatsoever? Like, that was sad that he didn't accept it immediately. It got increasingly pathetic. Saying it so long after, especially after winning again, is just like there is truly no limit to the depths of his insecurity. Uh, right, I was doing the rating out of 10.